Hey, before we get to today's great episode, wanted to let you know of a new exciting thing going on for the Lounge. For the first time since we started this podcast, the Lounge has entered into a partnership with a company that is aligned in how we think. Completely stop gambling. So Betttr is giving away 200 free subscriptions for life to the first 200 users from this podcast. Download Betttr, find the link in the show notes, or searching Betttr in your app store. So it's Betttr, BETTR, quit gambling. Search for that on the App Store or click into the link in the podcast show notes. So I'll see you on Betttr. And now to today's episode. Welcome into the Gambling Recovery Lounge. My name is Eric and I'm a compulsive gambler in recovery. My last bet was June 15th, 2021. It's great to have everybody back in the lounge tonight. And tonight's a super special episode for a few different reasons. One, this is experience number 10. So we have made it to double digits for this podcast, which is pretty cool. And then we also have, for the first time, co-hosting with me, some guy named Edgardo, who is a name, I think, if you've listened to the other podcasts, especially the early ones. Edgardo, of course, is my wonderful life partner, and he's been involved with the production of this podcast since we started, and lately now has produced the last couple of them, and he's going to join me in the co-host chair tonight to do the interviewing. And we also have a little bit of a twist in the guests tonight. And as we talked about very early on with this podcast, we were going to continue to make sure that we keep a lens on this show involving not just the compulsive gambler in recovery, but also the loved ones that are affected. And tonight we have a wonderful couple and friends of ours that we met in the recovery space a couple of years ago, and we'll get into some of that discussion about how that happened and what that meeting is and such. But we're going to bring now in Ryan and Kiki. Ryan is the compulsive gambler, and Kiki is his wonderful wife and the affected loved one. So we're going to bring them in. Kiki and Ryan, welcome into the lounge. How are you guys doing tonight?
Thank you.
We're doing great. Thank you so much for having us.
Super excited about it. So we're going to kick off with what we've done now for the last several episodes. We're going to ask Ryan and Kiki to give us their recovery songs and why they've chosen them, and then we'll go from there with the actual interview. So Ryan, why don't we start with you? What is your recovery song?
All right. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with The Greatest Showman. We happen to love that movie and think that the soundtrack is absolutely amazing. There is a song in there called From Now On. Hugh Jackman sings it. We actually got turned on to the song, I think, during one of his auditions, and he couldn't hold back, and the song is just so powerful. But it's called From Now On. But there's just some lyrics in here that really hit home. It talks about what you're going to do from now on and how you're leaving behind the glamour. He says at one point that he drank champagne with kings and queens. Politicians praised his name, and that was the epitome of what I was trying to achieve as a gambler. I wanted recognition. I wanted my name to be known. I also wanted to obviously provide for my family. And he finally sees the light and is able to move forward from that. And he sees what's truly important in his life, which is his family. So it's a really good song.
Awesome. Thank you. I love the movie as well.
So good.
It's fantastic. Okay, so that's From Now On from The Greatest Showman. And thank you for sharing, Ryan. And Kiki, what is your recovery song?
Mine is Burn the Ships for King and Country. And it's about, burning the ship so long ago. And don't quote me on the historical events of it. I think it was during the Spanish Inquisition, and the captain was saying, you're going to this place and you're going to go forward whether you like it or not. And in order to make it so nobody retreats, we're going to burn the ships. And the whole song is about you have no other choice because you're not going back to where you came from. And it's all about moving forward. And that was me when I hit my rock bottom. It was like, there's no other choice. I either go back and live this life of insanity, or I drop everything and I get myself into recovery. And
Wow.
that's what I did.
That's awesome. All right. So that's called Burn the Ship. And you said the group was King and Country, or was that a King and Country? All right. We will get those added to the compilation of great songs. So thank you guys for sharing that. I'm going to now bring Edgardo in. Edgardo, how are you feeling about your co-host role tonight?
Oh, feeling a little nervous. It's my first time, but it's good. And I'm glad we got a chance to do it with Kiki and Ryan. So someone that a couple that we've gotten to know really well, and hopefully this will turn out to be a great podcast.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, and it's going to help a lot of people, which is why we are all primarily here to carry that message, right? So, all right, so we'll kick off. Ryan, if you could first talk about your abstinence date and let everybody know where you're at in the recovery space, and then I'll ask you to talk a little bit more after that.
Yeah, absolutely. I have been attending meetings since October 27th of 2022.
Nice. Oh, so coming up on 2 years. It's
Coming up on 2 years.
Very nice. Congratulations. Awesome. All right. Could we maybe start with you talking a little bit just about maybe your upbringing, what the family unit was like for you, and then maybe where that leads into when gambling first appeared in some way in your life?
Yeah, so gambling actually appeared in my life at a very early age. I was not the one doing the gambling, though. My parents were gamblers, and they don't gamble today, by the way. So thankful for that. But from an early age, they would take my sister and I to the casino, and they would drop us off at the arcade and leave us with a roll of quarters. We all remember what those looked like. And they'd say, go have fun. We're going to be upstairs. And they would come down and check on us every once in a while and perhaps give us another roll of quarters. But we were introduced to gambling at a very early age. We were left home alone. We were left in precarious situations at times. I remember one of my first introductions to gambling was when my dad had a poker night. And I remember my mom being so adamant about not wanting me to learn the game of poker. And, unfortunately, what it did for me at that age was only give me a greater desire to learn the game of poker. Had they not been playing poker, I probably would have turned away from it and never taken a second look, but I did. And when I finally did learn how to play at a very expensive rate, it captured my attention. But that was my experience at an early age with gambling.
Get into all those details. Okay, so that was what, in like you were under 10 years old at that point?
Oh yeah, gosh, we were probably even as young as 4 and 5.
Wow.
5, 6, going to the arcade.
Okay.
And dropping us off. We didn't know any better. That's all we knew. Life.
Right. And did that kind of thing go on for several years? That your parents
It
doing
did.
that?
There were times my parents pulled us out of school to take us to the arcade. And of course, we thought it was fun. We didn't know any different, but they would. So my parents, just to backtrack a little bit more, they worked in the casinos. Both of them met in dealing school, and they were around it all the time. So when they would take us to the casino or to the arcade, more often than not, it was not near home. Every once in a while, it was for the ease of getting there, but we grew up in Lake Tahoe, and they would take us to Carson City, to Reno, casinos that weren't their place of employment.
So their work life also then turned into their social life. Okay.
Yeah. And that's what you do in that industry, unfortunately. You get off work and you hang out, sit at the bar, put a couple quarters in the slot machines or poker machines. It's just, fortunately, life for a lot of people like that.
Got it. Okay, so now maybe you get into your teenage years, high school. What's kind of happening in Ryan's life at that point?
Well, at about age 12 is when I started swimming competitively, and that occupied all of my time. I swam on a very leisurely or club team at that age. And then it wasn't until about my sophomore year that my parents decided to move us to Carson City, where we swam on a more prestigious team. And I think it was about that age that everything kind of cooled down a little bit, because swimming was so much a part of our lives. And, obviously there was school involved. I mean, it kind of all revolved around just swimming in school at that point. I wasn't really introduced to gambling until I joined the military, and I was stationed in Connecticut. So I got reintroduced to poker and started going to the casinos late nights with buddies I had met working at Chili's, and was still in the military at the time, trying to work 2 jobs and have a nightlife, which obviously isn't conducive for anyone.
And what age are you at that point?
I was 22.
Okay. So there was a pretty sizable gap between the early young exposure to when you really started to actually do gambling when you were 21, 22. Got it.
Correct.
Okay.
And obviously the characteristics were there. I mean, I could play video games and sit there and play video games for hours, or whatever it was that occupied my time, or anything that I became obsessed about, that those character flaws are still there, even if I'm not gambling.
So then what starts to happen now as you start to play?
So starting with poker, it very gradually just became an obsession. I was living in Connecticut, and we were driving an hour or so to Foxwoods Casino, which has some notoriety because it's the largest casino in the country, I think. And so we would go, and obviously there were nights we just played home games and we would play tournament style, or weekends would roll around and we'd drive to the casino and play until 6 a.m. Unfortunately, drive home tired, but trying to work a job while in the military and then work a second job, it wore me out. I mean, it was my first time out of my parents' house, being on my own, and as a young adult, you don't realize how important sleep is, and I just deprived myself of it.
Well, when we are in our 20s, we think we're impervious to everything, right? Right? We could party all night and drink and all that stuff, right? So,
all of it.
And then was it only poker, or did you delve into any other stuff?
Well, actually, that was my first introduction to the stock market as well. A friend had given me a quote unquote tip about a certain stock, and knowing absolutely nothing, decided to put all my quote unquote bets on one stock, and I ended up making money on it. So fast forward a little bit, got to a point where this was in 2008, by the way. I was doing a short sale on my house and I needed the money. I was getting ready to move back to the West Coast. And so I sold that one stock and moved back. And the unfortunate thing is that I got a taste of what instant gratification tastes like. And I carried that with me. But I also carried with me the regret of not having more money to invest when the crash in 2008 happened. And so because then starting in 2020 is when I approached my wife and said, look, I really think we should invest in these stocks. And I approached her with an Excel spreadsheet, something I had already
color-coded,
been focusing, already slightly obsessing over, not even knowing if I was going to bring this to the table or not. And so I had all these stocks laid out. And obviously, you guys know that when the pandemic started, everything on the market started crashing. And I'd been told from an early age, buy low, sell high, buy low, sell high. And so now, carrying the regret of not having money to invest in 2008, 2009, I'm obsessing over this potential opportunity in 2020. And so I eventually present this Excel spreadsheet to her, and reluctantly she says, well, all right, let's do it. The important thing to note, like she'll mention, is that we were on the same page at that point, and we had decided to do this together. But what happened was I derailed, and when she went back to work, I took matters into my own hands and got introduced to a certain penny stock. And as that stock started to fall, I undiversified little by little all of our investments and eventually put it all into one stock.
So that's really interesting. You got a win. It was enough money to get you relocated back to the West Coast, but you were already starting to think, recovery literature tells us the win was never going to be big enough.
Right.
Once you got the taste, and you were chasing that one stock win for
Oh,
years
yeah.
and years and years. It's really, really interesting.
Oh yeah, that has stuck with me over the years, and well before I even entered recovery, everyone does it. You like to talk about your win, and it's the stock that's my claim to fame, if you will.
Right.
And
And then the ego comes in.
ego,
You
and you
want to
try
be
to
the big shot. Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
yeah,
Totally makes
and
sense.
you want to have more to talk about. You want to talk about the old stories now. Now you want to talk about the new ones.
For
And
sure. I want to ask one question back to the family stuff, because you were hinting at it, I felt like early. Did your parents end up becoming problem gamblers? Whether you know that factually or you think, or that ultimately dissipate and that never became a real thing as life went on.
Yeah, I think that there was a real problem. And I think I noticed more of it came out when alcohol was involved as well. But there were times when there was assistance that was needed from family members, and there was enablement, unfortunately. All I can say is I'm really happy to say that there's no gambling now. And I obviously can't speak too much on their story because that's their story. And I just know that I know that I was put in situations that maybe I shouldn't have been put in as a 6, 7, 8-year-old. And I have the opportunity now to not put my children in those situations.
No, thank you for sharing that.
Ryan, because your parents worked in the casinos, did they therefore have the experience or the knowledge on how to detect a gambling addict? Or do you think they should have?
Great question. I don't think so. They probably should have, yes. Seeing the same people day in, day out. I think the challenge with that is that it's so much of a tourist town that they're probably not seeing the same faces over and over and over again. You see a lot of new faces.
Mm-hmm.
You also see actors and actresses, famous people that come in. I think it was such a norm for them that, all of us in GA, how many of us can honestly say that we knew we were even a problem gambler? I didn't know, and I don't think that they knew either. I don't know. It's a tough question to answer.
Well, and that goes back a lot of years, and I think when we're learning this more and more now these days, along with the other things going on in mental health in our society, gambling addiction, which not even really until the last decade or so was even recognized as a true mental illness. And so probably way back in those days, because if you're talking about early 2000s or even
80s
further back in the 80s, okay,
We're
so even further.
Look.
So it was probably just totally unspoken for anybody that was truly developing a problem. And as a society, and the way gambling addiction has a total lack of like federal funding, like there's such an underserved amount of money and awareness that anybody's really even paying attention to until recently. And so
we're going back almost 40 years.
Yeah. But it's a great question.
Yeah, definitely a lot more awareness around it now, for sure.
Yeah. So let's bring in Kiki. So you guys meet when?
August 6th, 2016.
Okay. How did you meet?
At a dinner party. We had a mutual friend, and I was living in East Africa at the time. But born and raised in the San Diego area. Ryan was living in the San Diego area. I was back here on sabbatical, and mutual friend had a dinner party, and she said, sit next to someone you don't know. Ryan was the only person I didn't know that was there.
Okay.
So this hunka.
So that's 2016. So at that time, Ryan, you were not gambling at all, or you were and Kiki didn't?
Not in the traditional sense.
Okay.
He had mentioned to me actually pretty early on that, he never used the term compulsive gambler. He didn't use the term addict. But he did mention to me that like gambling gripped him in his early 20s. And, when he was in the military and he grew up around the casinos and he was into poker, but he realized that it was something that was kind of a vice in his life. And so he hadn't done it. And me not knowing anything about addiction, I'm like, sounds great, but you don't do it. And that was kind of all I knew from that point.
Okay. And you, Kiki, in your life, you're growing up, there was no gambling in your family. You didn't have any exposure to it to even be aware of that it could be fun or thrilling, or like that just didn't hit your radar?
It's around, you can't really live in this country without seeing gambling. You see the lotto, you see the scratchers, you see the sports betting and the fantasy football. Like that stuff was around. I didn't grow up under a rock by any means. It wasn't really prevalent in my life. I mean, it was like, I can distinctly remember that my mom came home one day with a lottery ticket. I was little and she was like, I've never bought one of these, but the jackpot's so big, we figured why not? And it was like a single ticket.
Right.
And then it was like, well, that didn't work, waste of a couple bucks, throw it away and we move on with our lives. And I grew up.
Good thing she didn't win.
Yeah.
You could be in different seats.
Exactly. We could the case.
Okay, so you meet in 16, now you're dating, and so kind of how does the relationship evolve, and then what starts to first signal we got something going on here that's a problem?
So we didn't date. That's this is, and I don't think you guys know this about us.
All right, we're getting some juice here tonight. I love it.
I knew after about a week that I was going to marry him. And he knew after about 2 weeks that he was going to marry me, because men, sometimes it just takes them a little bit longer.
Guilty as charged.
Yeah. So after a couple of weeks, he's like, oh my gosh, like, I want to pursue you to be my wife. And I'm like, finally, it's taking you 7 extra days to figure this out. So at that point we were like, well, we should go on our first date. I know nothing about this guy, like legit nothing. Mm-hmm. And he's like, well, where should we go on our first date? And I'm like, there's this Dollar Fish taco place around the corner. Like, and I was staying with my parents at the time. Like, let's go there. And we did that. We went to like Costco for free samples. So he was right away is like, I love this chick. She is so low maintenance. She wants like dollar tacos and Costco samples for lunch. We only really got to know each other over the course of 2 months before I went back home. And we just had to really figure out what the heck we were going to do with our lives. At that point, we kind of knew Ryan was going to be moving out to East Africa with me. So over the course of 2 months, we didn't know each other. We greatly enjoyed each other's presence and company. I mean, we were head over heels for one another. He was calling in to my oldest son at the time. We were FaceTiming in because he was still over in East Africa. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until about a month after I moved back that I got a phone call from Ryan. And he said, I've got amazing news for us. And I'm thinking like, what is it? Like, I love amazing news. And maybe this is what I live for. And he had gone out. He told me he'd gone out to Starbucks with my best friend. And they were talking to someone, and this guy approached him and said, I'm about to be a millionaire and you guys can be too. And right away, as Ryan's telling me this story, I am sitting here with my head in my hands going, some like prince from Nigeria probably just approached him at, a Starbucks or whatever, and is reeling him into either some Ponzi scheme or some kind of crazy wiring of money, or he's getting fished and scammed hardcore. And he goes on to tell me about this incredible business opportunity. And that was my first big red flag. And I think I was just flat out like, I don't know what this guy told you, but it sounds like a Ponzi scheme. And then he says, well, Mark was really in on it too. And that was my best friend. And I'm like, oh. And now this person who I had known for many years, who's brilliant, great head on his shoulders, I really trusted his train of thought. And so when Ryan tells me he's in, I'm going, well, I guess maybe it doesn't sound that bad. Maybe there is some kind of business investment, and maybe God has blessed us with this incredible opportunity. And that was when I think I first started second guessing my own gut or common sense at that time. of thinking I must not know anything. And of course, as months passed, because this payout was supposed to happen, these payouts, they happen right away. It was going to be next week, and then it was going to be the week after and a month after. And here we are. That was 2016, we're in 2024. Absolutely nothing has ever come of it. But he then started putting his money in and then pulling other people and pulling other people. And we knew friends who pulled out their entire retirement, everything that they had, and put everything into this company. Because Ryan is the most incredible salesperson. He will sell something that he truly believes in, and he truly believed this was going to be this big multi-billion-dollar next hot thing.
So then what happens?
Didn't pay off, Eric.
The point she's trying to make is that regardless of whether it paid off or not, it was my attitude towards whatever this was. I've been the person who has been pulled in, sucked in like a magnet to all these MLMs, and it's the talk of fortunes on the other side that can be had if you just give it your all for a couple of years. And fortunately, those things never pay off. But it's the lure.
Get rich quick scheme.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
it's
right.
the lure of it. And I very quickly became obsessed. Like she said, I would try to come up with other ways to make more money off of the investment than what was just on the table.
And he did. He sucked. So he made an arrangement with that particular organization. And this is very early on into our engagement, that he'll get X number of shares, because everything was just purchasing stocks. I'm just going to purchase all the stocks. Now, he didn't have any money at that time. So for him, what did you have? Like $1,000 probably that you were able to put in?
No, we put 5 into that time. 4 in.
I don't remember how much. Whatever it was, we weren't married at that time. His finances were very separate from mine. So it wasn't like either one of us was wealthy. I was living in the mission field. Right. So he put what he had into it and then said, hey, if I can get more people, can I get a commission?
They actually approached me on it. They gave me that offer and said, if you find other people that want to invest, we'll give you a commission in shares on it. So immediately I was like, free money? Absolutely.
And that's when he started. Yeah, that's when he started pulling people. Well, if you guys have $250,000 to put in, then dump it in, because then he's getting the commission, the residual. And this whole time he was still paying off some debt, trying to get ready to be a husband and pay for our wedding, and just attempt to provide. And he was providing what he could. He was sending money out for me and our son, who was my son at the time. He was definitely doing that. But after we got married, again, just like he said, with that, once he started swimming, his focus shifted away from the gambling into, I got to do this thing now. And very quickly he had a culture shock 3 days after our wedding. I mean, I flew in a week before our wedding going, gosh, I really hope I remember what this guy looks like. And I did. And I was like, oh yeah, he's cute. I remember now. And it was only 3 days after we flew back to East Africa. So he now has quit his job, moved across the world, gone into and everything shifted. The focus totally shifted for that first start of our marriage. And the gambling didn't really fully resume until we came back to the States. And it was in 2018 when our youngest son is biological, and we were coming back to the States simply to have the baby, and then we were going to move back. I mean, we left our stuff there. Like, got it. All of our stuff was there. And it was 2 weeks after we arrived in the United States, Ryan said, I don't think we're supposed to go back. And I'm sitting here like super pregnant with my child and one suitcase that I've brought back, saying like, don't tell me this right now. This is not something. And he said, I want to be the one to provide for us. And it was again into that, I need to make the money. I need to be the one to be the financial provider for this family. And I'm going to do everything I can to make money and make money quickly so that we can live here in the States and I can be the one. And that was that second time that my mind went, something isn't right. Something is off with the financial issue. And remember, I like dollar tacos and Costco samples, so I'm not real high maintenance.
Right.
So
Okay, so this is 2018 now.
Mhm.
Okay, so now you have this fork in the road about where you're going to live. So then what happens?
So I actually gave Ryan an ultimatum that year. It was right after our son was born. And I don't remember how many years I said. It was either 1 year or 2 years. Do you remember? It was 1 or 2 years. It probably would have been one. We may have negotiated on 2. And I said, you've got this 1 year or 2 years to figure it out. And if you can't figure that out, like, you pulled me out of my home, you've pulled me out of my whole life right now. If you can't figure this out and get essentially like a stable career in this time, not that he was waiting tables while we were back. And there's nothing wrong with waiting tables. I just didn't understand why we were here versus what we had discussed. So yeah, I told him, if you can't get this figured out, I'm taking the kids and I'm moving back.
So you compromised with, okay, we'll stay here for a finite period of time. And if this goes well, then okay. And if not, I'm out of here.
Yep.
Got it. We're going to take a break.
Horrible to say, by the way. Like, I recognize that very much.
So what is it that was going through your mind, Ryan, to say, I'm going to change all of these plans that we've set and completely change our lives? What was the reasoning behind that?
I mean, there was a few things. When we were living in Africa, the first is that we were not in a very good place. And we also did not have community. We weren't around. Not that there's, what's the word I'm looking for? There's so many.
So being in a different culture
yeah.
Can be very challenging as a foreigner. Any foreigner moving into a different culture, it can be extremely challenging to find people to surround yourself with who you can relate to on certain levels, of course.
So there was that. To answer your question, I had grandiose plans to make it big, to create an app that would be the next, I don't know, Facebook or Uber or whatever, you name it. I can think up these fantastic ideas, but as my wife likes to tell you, or anyone listening, I lack the executive functioning skills to put it all into action. So while the idea itself may be grand, the heart posture behind it, the motive behind it wasn't quite right. And as much as I can tell you that I do want to provide for my family, and I do, there's also the other side that wants that leisurely life. It wants ease, it wants comfort, it wants to be able to do what I want to do when I want to do it. And that's just not feasible. It's not reality. And I lived in that place from a very early age, when probably till the age of 24, I'd say. If you were to ask my parents what we talked about on the phone, kid you not, every single conversation we had was about money. It was about how I was going to be rich and wealthy. And it's all I fantasized about, all I wanted for a really long time. I remember it kind of started as a joke, but I remember signing sometimes pieces of paper and telling people they may want to hold on to this because it's going to be worth something someday. Talk about ego and
all the characteristics.
Yeah.
And it was a great question. And Edgardo, of course, comes from the lens of this is who he dealt with me for years, right? I mean, we have these common threads of we live in fantasy land, and
I lived in it.
We take that into our
own fantasy land.
Own fantasy land. What you just said was really interesting about your parents. Do you feel like your relationship mostly with your parents, and maybe this stems back to their their casino working days, or was it a relationship more based around transactions as opposed to really emotional relationships? And that's maybe what kind of caused some of your emotional pain as you were getting into adulthood?
I think it was pretty transactional. You know what's funny is I can answer that question and then follow up with another question and say, but aren't most families transactional? It's a funny question to ask, because in one of my meetings, there is a GA member who will sit there and say, yeah, of course I answered 17 to 20 of these questions. Doesn't everybody? And it's not until he asked his friend, who is not a compulsive gambler, to answer the questions, to which he only answered 3,
Right.
maybe 4.
Right.
You're like, are you serious? You didn't lose sleep over any gambling? You didn't,
Right.
you know,
Well,
so to answer your question, yes, it's transactional, but in my mind, it seems like every family probably has some sort of transactional behavior.
yeah. Well, I think I ask it because I relate well to that, as I think I've told my story in different ways. And I do think what in my upbringing became mostly just a transactional, non-emotional
Mhm.
upbringing, not a bad upbringing, just like a very surface level household that I grew up in, and it didn't invite the sharing of feelings and emotions. And so it was very hard for me to find my voice. And then, of course, for me, that led to the specificity of being, in the closet for years, and all the running away and fear and all those things that replicated itself later in addictive days. And I ask it too, because I think we always do find, for most of us at least, when you can look back on your life in recovery with more clarity, we generally can find that our addictive behavior eventually stemmed from some kind of running from something emotionally traumatic. Maybe there's a financial component. And I think your story so far, you have talked more about you were chasing the stock. You wanted to be the financial provider. So I feel like your story is going along the line of, you started gambling for monetary purposes, but I'm wondering if what that spilled ultimately into an addiction stemmed more from your inability to process your emotions and life in a normal way.
Do I process my feelings in a good way?
Now,
Right?
I mean, now you speak about them. You don't shut down and escape. Yes.
Right.
But that's recovery.
That's right. That's a great place. We're going to break there. And then when we come back on the other side, we'll get into where Ryan's gambling really started to come to a head, and then turn the corner into where recovery comes into play. So with that, we'll be back in the Gambling Recovery Lounge. Welcome back into the Gambling Recovery Lounge. All right. We are reaching that point now of the story for Ryan to tell us how the gambling really starts to escalate for him, and then where things really derail.
So, like I mentioned, it was around 2020 when I saw this quote unquote amazing opportunity, and went to my wife with a proposal of sorts and asked if we could invest in these certain stocks. With the little knowledge I had, she obliged, and sure enough, we did okay. We did well in our initial investments. And when the big shift that really took place during that time was when my wife went back to work, and I was working from home, or at least trying to work from home. And I had a job which was not hourly. It was a commission only role, and I only got paid if I made sales. And coincidentally, it also allowed me to invest my time in other areas where I thought I could make money as well. So either way, I was trying to make money, but I figured I might as well do what I enjoy doing as opposed to doing something that I was an employer of or employee of. So fast forward a little bit, Kiki's at work. We have already invested in these certain stocks, and it has already gripped me. I am at a point where I'm already not getting sleep at night, and I'm waking up early in the morning, and I cannot wait to see what the stock market is doing. And I am trying my darndest to study these things, but I have no clue what I'm doing. All I know is I want to make money. And so you get involved in Discord communities, you get involved in chats, and at the end of the day, it ends up being what they call an echo chamber, where you are hearing exactly what you want to hear. And needless to say, I got turned on to a certain stock that also had their headquarters in San Diego. And like I mentioned before, found ways to try to involve myself with the company and use my creativity to create a product that they could ultimately sell on their online platform. So I invested a lot of my time into this and sold other people on the idea of it. So now I'm in a way I'm invested more than just financially. I'm invested in my own ideas as well and hoping to make money on those also. So my gambling, by the way, went well beyond stocks. It went into business ideas that, obviously I wanted to use to benefit our family, but it ended up being really the demise of our relationship.
Now, as the money's pouring out, were your finance, Kiki, did you know about the money, or he was able to hide and start to be that manipulator and stuff?
I had no idea.
So it did go into other areas. It really took a downfall with the investments that we had. That was the largest sum of money. And like I said, I slowly but surely undiversified everything that we had and everything that she knew about. And over the course of basically an entire year, I kept putting money into this one individual stock. And that stock is still a penny stock today. So I obviously feared telling her, but a part of me really wanted her to know as well. I just unfortunately couldn't bring myself to do it. And it wasn't until tax season rolled around that what was in the dark came to light. And she found out because we had to file our taxes, right?
Mm.
So she had, and then we have, everything's joint. And, when she found out, I mean, maybe you want to touch base on that a little bit.
Yeah.
So this was tax season 2021 or 2022?
It was tax season. So it was late January, early February. So I had been back at work for a little over a year or two. I didn't have any bandwidth when I got back home. Ryan was working from home, but ultimately my income was kind of floating the family at that time. So he was dropping the kids off to school, picking them up, taking care of the household things, and also working from home, or what I knew working from home. So when the tax season rolled around, I was starting to put all the files together, and I said, hey, I need to know what we have in the investment account so I can start to look. And that was when Ryan said, not much. Mm-hmm. And I said, not much? What kind of not much? Are we talking like we've lost 10%, 50%? And he said, I think we might have $100. Whatever it was not much that was left in that account. And I cried that night a lot. I cried in the shower, and I said, what happened? Okay. And he said, I put all of the money into this.
I didn't at first, actually. I initially told her, well, everything's kind of going down right now. And I tried to generalize it in a way that would hopefully get me off the hook. And
right. In other words, it wasn't a gambling problem. I just unfortunately made some bad investments like anybody else might do. Got it.
Yep.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But she's too smart for that.
Well, I wanted to believe it. Yeah. I mean, nobody wants to believe that their partner is an addict of any sort.
Right.
And I just remember thinking, okay, well, we can bounce back from this, because initially I didn't think this is an addiction. Like he said, I initially thought he made some really poor decisions. We're going to get, he didn't lie to me about it, quote unquote, didn't lie, because when I asked, he came forward and said, what was he going to do? He's going to hide it. Like the papers were there. Later the paper trail came in.
Right.
And I said, we're going to get back up. It's not going to be a big deal. until the paper trail came in. And that was about a month later. And it was, I believe it was a month or two later, it was in March when I started to get all of the tax forms in. And I said, what are these accounts? And that was when I realized that there were a whole bunch of accounts that had been opened that I had no knowledge of.
Wow. Okay. And Ryan, you had to know this all was going to show up in the paperwork. And
I mean, I knew at some point, yeah.
right. And
Yeah.
was it just you didn't have I'll just, for lack of a better way of saying it, you didn't have the guts to just have the proactive conversation? You were going to just let the paper trail tell the story and then see if she called you out on it?
No, I think I knew at a certain point she would ask, because she would ask me periodically along the way, how are our stocks doing? And they were up and down. I mean, that was just the reality of it. That's just kind of what happens in the stock market. And so I would just kind of fluff it up and be like, oh, they're kind of down a little bit. They're like, oh, okay, well, we'll bounce back. She never really asked too many questions, but I knew we were approaching the day where everything would be disclosed. And it was at the end of 2021 where I remember making the last purchase of that stock. And like I said, I undiversified everything, and just when something was up, and I would sell off that one while it was up. And then this one, it was down, so I would sell it off, and I would even out my earnings from it, trying to reduce the tax implications. And I remember selling the last bit of shares that I had in whatever company it was to make that final purchase before the end of 2021. And it was like, all right, I'm going all in at this point. Whatever happens, happens. And in the back of my mind, don't get me wrong, I was sweating it, but I was thinking, because I'm this eternal optimist, right? Thinking, okay, it's going to bounce back. I'll be able to get a return on our losses and make the money back and hopefully have it back in our account before she finds out. That was always the goal. It was like, let's just get back to where we were before everything started tanking and just call it even, so that I could escape, without.
Did you believe at the time you were an addict, or you had not really
No.
Okay, got it.
No,
okay.
Not at all.
And Kiki, had because he was talking earlier about how, he was sweating it out all the time. He was consumed by it. I would imagine, Ryan, your sleep was affected. Did you notice changes in his behavior? Or you were just so consumed with your own job, and then you've got your kids, and it's kind of like, I didn't have my eyes open enough to spot it, that kind of thing?
Is trying to keep my head above water, to be honest. I was drowning. We were still getting out of that pandemic phase where our regulations were still very restrictive. I was having a difficult time finding staff. Our youngest son was having to switch preschools at that time because of his behavioral needs. Our oldest son was going into special education, and it was a lot at that moment. And I wasn't able to notice anything, which is why I think it was kind of that perfect storm.
I also did just enough to get by.
Yeah, definitely.
I still had dinners prepared certain nights of the week. I still had our boys picked up from school and dropped off in the morning. But what she didn't see was me on the computer in there trying to figure stuff out. The boys at a certain point just watching the tablet out here. And then when I knew she was about to get off work or come home, it was like, all right, everybody get into gear. We're cleaning the house. Right. And we would try to straighten up everything as much as we could before she got home, so that I could appear to have this productivity throughout the day that would keep her.
So you're creating all those facades and manipulative moves and planning the next lie to all cover up her potentially spotting some behavior.
Yeah, but I wasn't a liar though. I didn't do
that. Of course not.
No, because he told me the truth, right?
He would
tell me the truth when I asked, and so he would always say I'm not a liar.
Right.
So, Kiki, as you're opening these tax letters, what is going through your mind at that point? I mean, do you realize, oh my gosh, he's been lying to me? Like, what's going on in your head at that point?
No, I didn't realize he had been lying to me at first. Some Gamanon people say this, but there must be some mistake. why is this coming in? This can't be, because Ryan had disclosed. So what I had known about, what I had agreed to, is we were going to put some of our savings into the stock market. That was all I knew about. I had not realized that all of these other accounts were coming in. So I'm thinking there must be some mistake, or there's a bunch of maybe like duplicates of things that are coming in. But it wasn't long after I asked him and I said, what are these from? And again, Ryan, being the very honest person, quote unquote, that he was, he would tell me the truth. And he said, well, that was some money that I moved from my 401k. And that was when I said, some of the money, well, what about this retirement? Well, that was that. And when I had looked, he had moved his entire retirement and opened up these stock accounts and had traded them all. And then was when I opened up the one that tore me apart, which was, this was our kids' college fund. And it was looking at the transactions that were made, and I could visibly see, once it kind of all, I got the big picture of what these documents are and I had them all lined up, I could actually visibly see the chasing of the losses. That a stock plummeted, it was sold and purchased here, or then a stock rose, and then the stock that he was going into was plummeting, so he bought more, and slightly blacked out that day, just to be honest, because that was the moment I went from, my husband's made some mistakes and we can bounce back, to I'm dealing with an addict who has absolutely no idea that he's an addict, and I have believed this lie. And then the shame, the self-condemnation, how can I be so stupid? How can I have gotten myself so caught up in this? How can I have done this to my kids? I've trusted this man with my children. What has been going on all day when I've been gone at work? Is this the reason? Is this the real reason that commissions haven't come in? Because we haven't been actually focusing on the job. And so much of that kind of hit ahead in March of that year. And we had a slight separation at that time. And I said, you've got to get yourself some help. Because of, again, I wasn't focused on me. I didn't need recovery. I was perfect, right? I was doing everything that a perfect spouse was doing. There was nothing that I needed. It was all on Ryan. Ryan was the enemy. Ryan was the one who was ruining our family. He was the bad apple who was rotting us. He was the reason that our kids are having these struggles, that were, everything that I shifted all of my blame onto him. So we separated in, I believe in March, it could have been April, sometime in that spring, that we went on a marriage retreat, a very short one. And during that time, it was virtual, because things were still virtual in 2022. He had said to me, I still have an addiction, or I have an addiction. And that was all I needed to hear. That was it. In my mind, he's admitted it. He said he has an addiction. I can work with this. I can be supportive. I can be this wife to him. We're going to get into couples. And here comes the controlling part of me, right? We're going to get into couples therapy. He's going to get into individual therapy. We're going to start digging deeper into our church. We're going to make sure that, my job is changed. His job is changed. We're going to make all this time in recovery together. And I had this big concrete plan that was going to get us back to this rightful standing. And we were okay for probably the next few months. We were in this decent position up to maybe even the next 6 months, until I got laid off and our house closed, our residential program closed. And it was when that closed, I realized that since March, and when he said, I have an addiction, and he's working on himself and we're in therapy, I was home for the first time in a couple of years, watching what he was doing when he was, quote unquote, working all day. And that's when I realized, oh my gosh, he has no idea. Maybe he's not trading anymore, and he wasn't trading, But those business ideas that he was talking about, they kept springing up and springing up. So he had made, for one of the stock that he was really invested in, he had made a partnership and come up with a way to be a business. He had signed on an investor with this business. Again, things that I was unaware of. And he had gone into designing a deck of cards to play a poker game online with. And that was going to go onto this online platform and be sold. And I kid you not, when all of this came down, this was in September, late September of 2022, right before I joined Gamanon. I completely blacked out that night. I have no recollection of the vast majority of our conversation, except for me saying, you have no idea that you're still doing this. You're still hiding these things from me. You are still gambling and you're not aware. And the last thing I remember him saying to me was, if you would only support my dreams, we wouldn't be in this situation. And that was the pinnacle for me. That was the night that I hit my rock bottom, for sure.
Wow.
So going back to those few months prior to that, Ryan, when you admitted to Kiki that you had a gambling problem, did you truly believe that at that point that you had a gambling problem, or was it, let me just appease her?
I think it was a kind of a combination of both. I think that my heart was really open to the idea that there was an issue. And I think that I could reduce it to simply stocks. And I think that was the extent to which I could admit that there was a problem. So in my mind, get rid of the stock trading, even though there was still like this desire to want to have control over that, to want to dabble, I could admit that there was an obsessive trait. So when I said yes, when I said, yeah, I think I am an addict, it was simply stock trading at that point.
How did it feel the day you said those words, though, for the first time out loud?
Oh man, I think it was scary. It was, I think, humiliating just because of the stigma that's attached to that word.
Right.
Nobody ever wants to be labeled. Nobody ever wants to be different. We want to fit in society and in today's culture. And we know that the people who are labeled as addicts are generally outcasts. They're the ones on the side of the streets that they can't get a job.
And we hear the word degenerate.
Yeah.
Right. It's such a stigma that's
Oh,
attached to it. Yeah, for sure.
It was scary. It's a very humbling place.
Yeah. Wow. So then now you're getting towards your October date. So what shifts at that point so you black out that night? This is your rock bottom, Kiki. So like what happens right after that for you guys?
I was floundering. We separated. So we were separated under the same roof. So much of this, I very much wanted to protect the children from what was going on. We had already been separated earlier that year when I first found out, and I'm going, I can't do this again to the kids. This isn't helpful for them. So I said, let's separate under the same roof. When they go to bed, you go sleep out there, I'll sleep in here. We live in a 2-bedroom and we'll make that work. It was a horrible idea. So I called up my previous therapist and said, I'm coming in on cash. What kind of discount can you give me? I need to talk to someone. And she was wonderful. And I got on the phone with her. This was in October. I was able to make the appointment. And she said, have you heard of Gamanon? And I'm like, I ain't heard of nothing on. I'm like, I just need some help, lady. And
these big words you're throwing
yeah,
at me.
like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. Like, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I was great. I was on the verge, truthfully, on the verge of checking myself in and trying to get myself on a hold because I was I felt like I was having a psychotic break, even though I don't know what that is. It was this outer body experience for me. Things were happening that I've never had happen to me before. The biggest one was loud noises. I had this startle reflex that I have never had. If Ryan were to have walked behind me, or if I were to have heard a loud noise, really anyone to walk behind me, I would immediately think I was dying. And he's never hurt me. Like he is the most gentle human. He doesn't yell, he doesn't swear. But in me, I was terrified for my life. So my therapist had given me a list of these Gam-Anon meetings, and she actually also said, in the meantime, get to something today. There's an Al-Anon meeting up the street from you, and it's like, just go to something. So I actually ended up going to Al-Anon for quite some time too, and sat in the room thinking, this is really not super helpful. Like, it's kind of helpful. I'm with people who are loved ones of addicts, but my spouse just hasn't, as far as I know, has never had a drinking issue. So it wasn't until a little bit later that I was kind of ready to try this Gam-Anon thing. And again, now us being separated, I'm going, I don't trust the kids with him. I don't trust anybody with him. So I'm super grateful that there was a virtual platform, because honestly, if there wasn't, I don't know if I would have been able in myself to get to a room, because I don't think I would have been able to leave the kids. That's how fearful I was. So I was able to join Gam-Anon, and that was October 25th of 2022.
So 2 days before, Ryan, your first GA meeting on October 27th?
Yep.
It was
the Tuesday Gam-Anon meeting.
Wow. And so you go into the first Gam-Anon meeting. So what drove you, Ryan, to go to your first GA meeting 2 days later?
This girl.
This lady right here.
So how did that conversation go?
Oh, it was a lot of me yelling. It was
A lot of threats.
There were a lot of threats, a lot of yelling, a lot of rage. I mean, screaming, not yelling, screaming.
And Ryan, before that, in those couple months where you're doing the separation under the same, what were you trying therapy? Were you didn't go to GA yet, but were you doing something else to try to get a hold of this, or no?
Yeah, so I actually was doing therapy at the time, and I had not obviously yet started attending GA meetings. I even went to my first meeting very reluctantly, just to really appease her, if I'm being honest, probably like most GA members.
That would be me.
Who have a loving spouse.
Yeah, that's correct.
And it wasn't a very good meeting, I'll be honest. It was like 3 people, and it was
online or in person?
In person.
Okay.
In person, very small meeting, but I didn't relate to anybody. My gambling is different than what is even detailed in our yellow book. And it does mention obviously stocks and commodities, which I could relate to, but these people were casino gamblers pulling the slot machine handles, and there was still a disconnect. And that very same night, the night that I went to that meeting, I came home. She was already in the combined meeting on Thursday night, and that was my first combined meeting. So I went to 2 meetings that night, the second of which was much more helpful.
Hence why we're still there.
Why you're still there.
So Ryan, in hearing how this all affected Kiki and what she went through, what would you say was the worst way that your gambling actually affected Kiki?
The biggest way in which I affected Kiki, or my gambling affected Kiki, was, I think, hands down, loss of trust. I think that's been and there's obviously a lot of things that you can lump into that category of trust. Her trauma responses, lying. It's something that I will unfortunately have to continue to build for a very long time. And it's very hard to be on the receiving end of distrust, of not be trusted.
And Kiki, do you trust him now?
Oh, in a lot of areas, absolutely. Yeah, I don't trust him with controlling the finances though at all. I don't think that's something that I will be ready for quite some time. But there are a lot of areas that I do trust him in, and there's a lot of areas that I actually trust him in more now that he's in recovery. Even just probably 4 months back, I had said, hey, I am seeing signs of you slipping into a relapse, and I'm not going to be here for that. I'm not cool with this. And if you would like to make a plan so that this doesn't happen, let me know. I'm here, but I'm going to be continuing my meetings, and I can't have this lying happening. And that was kind of what I was noticing. And lying, the kind of like easing off meetings, easing off talking to a sponsor, easing off the step work.
Complacency was setting in.
Complacency is a good terminology for that. And since that time, a few months ago, he came up with a plan. Like, he made a plan, and he has actually stuck to it since. So as of today, I actually trust his word a lot more than I've ever trusted it in our entire relationship. And I also see that he is sticking to his word. I see when he says, I'm going to do something, he was working, he was working. He has a stable job. That's a big thing, is having that source of income. He also signed the house over. He took, he allowed me to be his power of attorney and took the legal action to put me as his power of attorney. And if something happens to me, there's 2 people who will take my place in that. And we went through those steps where his name is not on the accounts that we have. He has 100% of say in our joint account, as I have 100% say in our joint account. He just doesn't have control over the finances. So when he says something that he's going to do, I believe it a lot more now than I ever have. Still don't trust him controlling the finances though.
So Ryan, what would you say today in your recovery process as you come up on 2 years, is the biggest character change positively for you?
So to date, I'll just speak as of right now. Mm-hmm. I think for me, and it's something I am actively working on, actively pursuing, is following through. Like she already mentioned, it's doing what I say I'm going to do in the time frame that I said I was going to do it. And if I don't, it's communicating with her, acknowledging that I didn't do it, but also bringing a follow-up. And that is something that I have struggled with since I can remember. I've always had somebody to bail me out, even from an early age. And unfortunately, I brought that into our marriage. I've expected at times for her to bail me out and to not be held accountable for my actions. And it's still hard for me even today. It's still really hard, but I'm working at it. And
has the step work helped you in that area, or you feel like that's still a major component of what you still have to be working on?
Yeah, no, I think the step work and talking with my sponsor is a huge factor in that. My sponsor, I think he played a significant role in just helping me come to terms with it. There's several people that speak into my life, and recognizing it is one thing, but then putting steps into action is another. And at a certain point, you just have to make the conscious decision that I'm going to do this.
Burn the ships.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So as of right now, I'm in a decent place where I'm making progress in that area. It doesn't mean it's not hard for me anymore. It still is very difficult, but I've gotten a lot better at it. I'll just say that. And
you are, I believe you told me recently, you are now sponsoring somebody in the program?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Congratulations on that. I mean, I can just say it's been one of the great gifts in my journey
It's
is
very
doing
rewarding.
that. So, that's wonderful that you're doing that. So, I'm really proud of you for that. Kiki, I have a few Gam-Anon based questions that I'm very curious about.
Sure.
First is, you've been very open in our combined meetings, and I'm sure you're even more open in the Gam-Anon only meetings about the importance of embracing the whole program, including you got a sponsor yourself, I believe, and you've been working on steps. What do you want to tell the people out there who maybe don't do the whole thing? Maybe they go in, but they pick and choose, because we have the same thing in GA, right? There's some members that come in and they dip their toe in the program, but they don't want to do the whole thing. They want to just go to meetings, but they don't want to get a sponsor. They want to work steps, but they don't want to be of service. And it seems like you've embraced the whole program. And if you can maybe just talk a little bit about what that's meant to your journey from your own perspective.
Sure. Yeah. So when I say I hit my rock bottom, I hit my rock bottom. Like it was done for me, which is again why I said burn the ships, because I was going in and I approached the program in the sense of whatever I've been doing for my entire life has not been working, because it's gotten me to where I am. And I'm hearing these stories. I remember my first meeting, my second meeting, of these people who've been in for 20, 30, 40, 50 years and going, y'all got your lives together, and I'm over here about to check myself in. So something you guys are doing is right. And maybe not every part of this program is going to be for me. I'm putting that in air quotes, for me, but I'm going to do the whole program as it's laid out, because right now my choice is that, or not being available to be a mom to my kids or to be a productive member of society, because I wasn't able to really do anything. So it was probably, I mean, I couldn't have been in Gam-Anon for more than 2 weeks when in our Tuesday meeting that we go to was a lot smaller at the time, where I'm like, hey guys, still new here. Y'all talk about these sponsors. How do I get one of those? Where do I start? Like, can somebody, you sent me the links to the literature, and I'm here with like the whole, like a library full of literature. I'm like, what do I do with this? I'm reading, but there's a lot of questions in here. What am I supposed to do? I just get a journal? Like, somebody help me.
Right. Show me the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was.
Right.
It was like that mayday call. So my sponsor actually reached out to me because I'm putting out this mayday call. And in between, I've gotten the phone list and I've called every single person who I had seen or met in the virtual rooms. I called every single person on that list throughout, between meetings, throughout the day, throughout my short walk at that time. And my sponsor was someone who said, hey, keep reaching out to me. And she made it very easy for me to call. Of course, I was calling everybody, but she actually approached me and said, look, I heard your cry for a sponsor. I can't sponsor anybody right now, but if you're really ready to start those steps, and it sounds like you're ready to start those steps, I will be your temporary sponsor until you can find one. And that was all I needed to hear. I'm like, done, I'll take it. I will take it. Let's give me homework. And I had, again, just been laid off. So I have time to sit and to work this and to do this and to get myself better. So she started assigning me homework, and we were together. I mean, I think we were probably like on step 5, maybe, when I said, hey, look, I know you signed up as my temporary. I'm still looking for a permanent sponsor. I just haven't had that like time to really call a whole bunch of people and really form that connection. She goes, Kiki, I don't want you to work the steps with too many people. And I'm like, I get it. And I think it was step 9. She's like, I know I was going to be your temporary sponsor, but I look at you as my sponsor. And I'm like, well, good, because I think we've been together for like almost a year at that point.
Right. Wow. That's a great story. And then a follow-up to that. I mean, we see it from just a participant perspective. The number of people that come into GA compared to how big the gambling problem is a fraction of the people that really probably should be there. And I think Gam-Anon, because for every compulsive gambler, I think the stat is something like we affect 7 or 8 loved ones. I think I saw something like that. And so the fraction of people that come into Gam-Anon as an effective loved one is so small. What's your perspective now that you've been in this almost a couple of years, right? Of why there's that lack of, is it a lack of just visibility, a lack of attraction? Is it the partners that maybe feel like, you know what, this is really not my problem. It's the gambler's problem. I don't have, like you said it earlier, like you were first blaming, like it's Ryan's issue. He's this, he needs to go fix himself. And then I have heard you very vocally flip that around as you've worked your program and talk about where you could be improving in different ways on yourself. And I just wonder if it's for so many people, it's I didn't create this mess. It is your problem. I'm going to go about my life. You go fix you, and then you let me know.
Yeah.
What do you think?
There's definitely some truths to that. I think it's a lot harder for a loved one to hit the rock bottom than it is for someone who's in addiction. And getting into recovery for me was a very distinct point in my life, because when I first found out back in that March area that he was an addict, I had zero desire to get into recovery. I didn't know about it. I didn't care, because I was using my coping mechanisms, which was control, manipulation, fear, threats, and yelling, to maneuver him to do what would make me feel safe. And so long as I was able to do that, there was nothing wrong with me. And just like Ryan had said, he had no idea he was an addict. I had no idea I was dealing with any of these shortcomings. I had no clue about it because it was what I knew. So I do think for a lot of people, there's definitely truth in it's not my problem. It's their problem, but it's also a lot harder, I really think, to find that clear-cut point of I need help as well. And a lot of people, I believe, get into Gam-Anon because they're trying to figure out ways to get their loved one to stop gambling, not because they're there for themselves. And it's very eye-opening when it's like, welcome to the literature. We are not here to get our loved ones to stop gambling. I mean, I think people just like log off or walk out at that point. It's like, what did I just get myself into?
Right.
Here. But I've told so many people, get yourselves into some kind of recovery program, because it's been so beneficial for me. And I know it's been beneficial for my spouse, and just seeing the people who really walked through this program or are currently walking. You don't get a finish. I found that out really short on. There's no like finish line. I was like, well, great. Here we go for life, but I'm loving it.
So Kiki, you spoke at one point about separating. What would you say is a reason you stayed in the relationship? And what would you say to someone that's struggling with staying in a relationship with a gambler?
So we actually separated because I was having such bad trauma responses with him being around that I couldn't heal. That was why we physically separated. We were separated again, we said, like under the same roof for a few months before he actually ended up fully moving out. But I truly believe that I was supposed to be married to this person. And if Ryan were to choose to walk away, that would totally be on him. I'm not saying I didn't want to walk away. I absolutely did. But one of the biggest reasons that I stayed was because I believed that if he were to get into recovery, that we could actually make this work. And it turns out I was right, that here we are. But they're also, the big kind of caveat of that is he had to be in recovery. I was not willing, and even to this day, I am not willing to be with him if he chooses to go down that route and feed the addiction versus feed the recovery. So long as he's in recovery, let's say, God forbid, he relapses tomorrow. If he's still in program, he's still calling his sponsor, I'm still here, because there can be relapse and right back into it. But if he, again, God forbid, relapses and turns around and says, I'm done, I'm not going to try anymore, I'm not doing this, I'm choosing the addiction over XYZ, you name it, I won't be here for that. And I've made that very clear in our relationship. So I'm 100% in if he chooses this. And, I think the hard thing, Edgardo, is there's not really a time frame on when has he chosen to walk away from recovery. And for me, we were separated for a few months. There was, I don't know if I had a full time frame. I wanted to get myself into recovery before I really looked at, well, what is this time frame? Does it look like a year? Am I going to wait a year for him? Am I going to wait 2 years? Am I going to wait 2 months? Thankfully, I didn't have to. Thankfully, he got into recovery and, a few months in, finally admitted he was a compulsive gambler with that.
So what advice would you give to someone who's listening that is struggling with staying in the relationship with a gambler?
I think it's so dependent on the situation.
Mm-hmm.
But the first thing is get yourself into recovery, because, in Gam-Anon, we say don't make any major decisions, at least for the first 90 days. And that's like a big at least, because there's so much that's swirling around during that first 90 days. And for some people, it's a lot longer. I mean, for some people, it's the first 6 months, first year. But until things kind of even out, just don't make any major decisions with that, including I'm going to go file for divorce right now. That's a pretty large decision with that. But I would also say every case is very different. Every situation is very different. This is our story, but there's a lot of other stories that don't end up this way. So while there is hope, there's also choice in the matter.
That's true. Yes. And Ryan, if you were to relapse, what would you have to lose?
Well, so long as I stay in the program, apparently nothing. Everything. I mean, yeah, I'm gambling with more than just the bet at hand. I'm gambling with my family at that point. So my wife, my kids, my life.
That about sums it up.
Simple answer.
Yeah, you two are a wonderful example of what happens when people decide together to go into these programs and work it separately and also work it together. And Edgardo and I have had that experience as well. And being with you guys on a weekly meeting and meeting in person, it's a miracle. It's just total miracles. And to watch the transformation in less than 2 years from where it started to where you are now is really a beautiful thing. And hopefully, I know it's helping a lot of people out there already, and that's going to continue to help a whole lot more. I want to ask one more question that I typically close with the compulsive gamblers on the show, and that's back to you, Ryan. So for the compulsive gambler listening who's at day one and feels like I don't know how to stop making a bet, I don't know how to do this, I can't imagine my life without gambling, what, with your almost 2 years now in recovery, is some words of wisdom you can share with that person?
I think my first bit of advice would be just to get connected, would be to call other people. And I think the biggest reason behind that is that you start to hear stories of others who are similar to you, who you can identify with. And sometimes that's the biggest encouragement we can have ourselves, is to be able to identify with others who have been through similar experiences. It's really tough to think that you're doing this all alone. Anytime there was somebody that shared something even remotely close to what I was dealing with, because obviously mine was more focused on stocks and starting businesses, I grabbed hold of those numbers. I reached out to those people and I said, hey, let's talk. Showed up a text message or whatever, but I wanted to be able to relate to other people in the program. And at times I will say I felt like an outcast. I felt like this isn't for me. I don't go to casinos. I don't play slot machines. I don't do horse betting, sports books, you name it. But I could identify with people that either played poker or were interested in stocks. And those are the people that I reached out to. So having that and having the support from other people is really key. That's, I think, one of the first things that I would recommend.
Great. Awesome.
I actually have a couple questions before we close out. Is there anything that either of you heard in this podcast that you had not heard the other say before?
It was when you were casino gambling in the military and someone approached you with that first stock. I never knew that
I was.
Or 08, so you were just getting
Yes.
out. I never knew that was when you were introduced to stocks, but now I know.
Now she knows everything about it.
Yeah. Is there anything that you heard, Ryan?
I think that there was a certain, I don't think I can pinpoint any one thing, but there was a certain level of openness in this meeting. And it's different when you're sharing it with somebody else than with your spouse. And I feel like I got a greater level of openness from her in what she shared with you guys. I think I saw more humility and more of like the vulnerability side of her going through that time than she's openly displayed to me, because obviously there's a lot of hurt when she's talking to me about it. I'm the reason, I'm the cause of the hurt. And so I don't think naturally she's going to have that openness and vulnerability with me, but
yeah,
I saw that today.
Well, thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Kiki, for coming on and sharing your story. This is going to resonate with so many people out there, and I think bring a lot of hope to the people that are struggling, either on the compulsive gambling side and they're struggling in a relationship, or also the affected loved ones, and sharing your journey and what is possible when you believe. There's never a guarantee of how anything works out for any of us, but it's a really beautiful story, and thank you for coming on and doing this. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having
guys.
us.
thank you.
All right. Well, that is a wrap on experience number 10 in the Gambling Recovery Lounge. If anybody wants to email in the show to either tell us what you thought of the episode, or if you have a question for either myself or Edgardo or Alyssa, or you want us to relay a question or comment to our guests, Kiki and Ryan, we will absolutely get that to them. So you can email the show at Eric at thegamblingrecoverylounge.com or Alyssa, ALYSSA, at thegamblingrecoverylounge.com. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming in for experience number 10 in the Gambling Recovery Lounge. We'll talk with you all later. Have a great evening.